I suppose I should have kept my nose out. I felt like I was just invading my wife's privacy and being a bit insensitive when I found her diaries. I told myself I had good intentions. I figured that by reading them a bit, I'd find out what she wanted and get the perfect 15th anniversary gift for her. What I found did give me an idea for her anniversary gift, but it took me a while to put it together. It took me about 5 years. I should probably explain a bit more about that. Sandy and I, James, were infatuated in high school. We were very much in love and learned the pleasures of closeness early on. Unfortunately, we were a little slow to learn about birth control. Our parents were not happy with us and took us out of town to be married in a very quiet civil ceremony, attended by the 4 parents and the 2 of us, even though we were both 18. If the school had found out, we both would have been expelled. We hid the pregnancy until graduation. It wasn't the best start to a marriage, but we were excited. We had a baby boy and a baby girl, which was great. My wife's father was able to get me a job on his construction crew, so I was able to provide for my new wife and children. Over time, I became a crew leader, which gave us enough money to afford a nice house in a working-class neighborhood. I worked long hours, and Sandy spent all her time caring for our children. We didn't have much time to ourselves, and our social life was limited to kid functions. Our parents did take the kids overnight on occasion, but that was rare. We had busy lives, but we maintained a reasonably active sex life. I took some classes during the slower winter months and eventually earned an associate's degree in business management when the kids entered middle school. I was promoted to a regional manager position, which made things much easier for us financially. My hours became a little more regular, but I had to travel to the home office for some manager meetings, which usually meant I was gone for 3 to 4 days every other month. Since the children had grown, Sandy decided to obtain a real estate license. Henderson really recruited her and advertised many of the spec houses that we had constructed. She did showings for the big company, even though her job meant she had to work regular hours. She enjoyed it, but it didn't pay much. The summer before the twins were to start their freshman year of high school, Sandy and I were approaching our 15th wedding anniversary. I'd been saving money to do something special for her, but I just couldn't think of anything. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kids were away, and Sandy had a showing, so I was home alone. I was getting desperate to come up with something special, so I thought I'd look through her closet and jewelry items. I was hoping to find some inspiration, so I took a look at her outfits and didn't have a clue what she might need or want. Then I decided to check out her jewelry box. What she had was pretty modest, so I thought maybe a nice diamond tennis bracelet would do the trick as I was putting her jewelry box back. I put it in the drawer, but it kind of stuck. Then I realized there was something in the back of the drawer preventing the box from going back in completely. I dug around and pulled out 3 small books. Each book was nicely bound with a small flap and lock to secure them. I stared at the books, and it dawned on me that I realized they must be her diaries. I'd never known she kept one, and I'd never seen her write in it or heard her mention it. I should have guessed they were very personal, and I shouldn't have looked at them, but curiosity has always been one of my weaknesses. Besides, maybe it will give me a great idea, for I cracked open her private diaries and began reading. I rationalized that it was okay because she'd given them to me. It appeared she'd started them when the kids were about 2. Much of the first 2 books were just recaps of important childhood events and not much else. The 3rd book was much more recent, and she also talked about her struggles to pass her realtor's exam and land the job with Henderson. It went on to talk about how nervous she'd been when she did her first showing, and how grateful she was to have Brad Henderson, the owner's son, help her write her first contract and consummate her first sale. She worked a lot with Brad, so the next few pages of entries were all about their activities together. One entry in particular caught my attention. Sandy had written a detailed description of young Mr. Henderson from her writings. I learned he was 24, nearly 10 years younger than me, and very well built. He had deliciously deep blue eyes and a smile that could melt a girl's heart. I quickly read on, and my world began to crumble. Looking over her entries, I discovered that it took Brad around 6 months to get her to go to bed. Over the course of the next year, they had slept multiple times. Their relationship would undoubtedly have lasted, but Brad was persuaded to relocate to the West to work as his understudy by his. My grandfather owned a number of resorts on the West Coast. In her diary, she often complained about losing her favorite guilty pleasure. That revelation put an end to any plans for making our 15th anniversary special. She got a cheap bouquet of flowers, a card, no dinner and no romance reading. Her diary showed she was very fond of Brad and didn't mind cheating on me. I was sure she would still. I was really hoping she'd be screwing the ass hat if he hadn't left town. Her attitude about cheating made me think she was looking for a stud to replace Brad. I focused on being supportive of my kids and let my feelings for the only girl I'd ever loved slowly die. My plan was to stay married to the cheating bastard until the kids left for college. We live in a no-fault state, so there was little I could do to protect myself from the courts. I dumped most of my money into a tuition account for the kids. I put the money we had saved into a tuition account for the kids, knowing that I would be responsible for that anyway. I also began to slowly collect cash and rare coins, and keep them in a safe in a rented fireproof, climate-controlled storage unit under my brother's name. Periodically, I would check her diaries to see if she had found a new boy toy, but there was never any mention of any new, delicious, guilty pleasures. She did, however, describe in great detail her lust. She had these really vivid daydreams about a few young men she'd met, but it seemed like she never acted on any of those feelings. Most of her entries were just recaps of her work life and the kids' adventures. As the kids were getting ready to graduate, she wrote about how she hoped to travel with me and finally enjoy life with her wonderful, thoughtful, loving husband. She actually wrote those words. I was so moved. I was really looking forward to the day when I could drop the kids off at school and go back home as official empty nesters. It had been a tough few years pretending to care about Sandy. I had shed a lot of tears at the beginning, but I gradually hardened my heart. I did still have sex with her, but it was just that I never made love to her. Our intimate life had slowed down a lot, but Sandy was always receptive and sometimes initiated things. It was a shame that I really liked having her around, and even began taking her from behind whenever I wanted. I'm not sure she really liked it, but she allowed it at that point. I didn't care what she liked. I was doing it for my own guilty pleasure, not hers. I had size big SUV packed to the gills and a ton of crap loaded onto the roof. The kids' campus was about 2 hours away, so we all chatted away as I made the drive. We got the kids delivered and set up in their respective dorms and got back into the SUV for the drive home. James, can you believe it? Our babies are off to college. It seems like only yesterday I was changing their nappies. Those early years just seem to have flown by. It's great to see them so excited about this next phase in their lives. Oh, James, I'm pretty excited to begin this next phase too. In our lives too, just think about the time we'll have to ourselves. I want to travel a little and really enjoy each other's company. Well, Sandy, I'm very excited to begin this new chapter in life. I'm truly looking forward to traveling with my beautiful companion to exotic places. Sandy grinned and kissed me on the cheek, then settled back in her seat and drifted off to sleep. I woke up when I pulled into the garage. I must have fallen asleep on you there. I can't believe we're home. You're home, I said as I got out of the car and opened the rear hatch and reached for my 2 suitcases. Sandy frowned at me and said, "Oh, did they forget some of their stuff just then?" A small SUV pulled into our driveway, and an attractive young lady got out and waved to me before opening. I opened the rear hatch of her car and said, "Nope, these are my bags." I carried them to the other vehicle and stored them. I kissed the young lady, and Sandy stood gaping at us. "Sandy, I'm sure you remember Caroline from my office. She's here to pick me up. We'll be back in about 3 weeks. How can you just spring this on me like this?" Caroline stepped up to Sandy and handed her a large envelope. I said, "Those are the divorce papers. I suggest you have an attorney review them. I think I have been fair, but still, you should get an attorney." "Divorce? What the hell do you mean, divorce? James, what's this all about? Is this some kind of sick joke?" "It's no joke. Caroline and I are leaving for You're going on a cruise and staying at a romantic island resort for a week. Have you lost your mind? We're married. You can't be running off with this woman. She's not a bimbo. In fact, it took me years to convince her to let me kiss her, but she was worth the wait. We have to go now. Since we have a flight to catch while we're away, the movers arrived and transported everything I had to Caroline's place. I've collected half of our money, and my attorney will address any queries you may have. James, please, how can you do this? How can you just leave me? we've had after almost 20 years together. Surely that means something to you? Yes, Sandy, it does. I loved you with all my heart for 15 years. I gave you everything I had to give, but it just wasn't enough for you. You just had to have your delicious, guilty pleasures. She was taken aback and quickly covered her mouth. My diaries. You read my diaries? She stammered. Oh my God, James, please. It was a mistake. Don't do this, please, I love you. I turned to Caroline and kissed her on the lips, then looked back at my soon-to-be ex. Wife, you had your delicious guilty pleasures. Now it's time for me to have a few of my own. Epilogue. Sandy tried to fight the divorce and even denied having an affair with Brad, telling everyone I had just lost my mind and run off with some Floyd. Fortunately, I had taken the diary with her handwritten confessions and sent photos. I gave it to the kids. They knew she'd lied. She tried to drag things out. But in the end, the divorce went through. It cost me a pretty penny at that point. I was living with Caroline, who was trying to make me feel good by making me feel really bad. Sandy asked for and I agreed to one final conversation when the final divorce papers, once the divorce papers were signed. She started apologizing to me, but I raised a hand to stop her. Then I asked her one question. Why, James? I did it for selfish reasons. I was flattered that a handsome young guy wanted me. I was sure you'd never find out. I never had any feelings for Brad except lust. It was just the whole forbidden thing. I was only the second person he'd ever cheated on. I was so caught up in my own pleasure that I never thought about the consequences of getting caught and hurting you. I'm so embarrassed by what I did and so devastated by what it has cost me. I hope you can forgive me someday. Sandy, you gave me 15 good years and 2 great kids for that. I will always love you. The last few years of our marriage were the worst of my entire life. I will always hate you for that. I assume I will eventually work out that conflict and maybe be able to forgive you, but don't hold your breath. I stood up and walked out of I could hear Sandy sobbing in the conference room as I left. By the time the kids graduated, I had worked through the pain of her betrayal. Thanks to Caroline, we threw a big graduation party for the kids, and Sandy came with her new boyfriend. He seemed like a good guy, and I told Sandy I was happy for her. She had moved on. I gave her a hug and told her I had forgiven her. She started crying and went to the restroom. Caroline put an arm around me and said that was a nice thing for you to do. Just don't give her any new guilty pleasures after she heard everything. Don't worry, beautiful. Your pleasures are the only ones I'm interested in, I said, laughing and giving my wife a hug. What do you think about OP? Thanks for joining us in our story where revenge is served hot. Please consider subscribing to our channel to ensure your next chef remains loyal. Tune in for the next one to get your revenge appetite fulfilled. If you're below 18, wait a minute, it's not for you. I'm sorry to hear that.